The following is a preview of the New Models Podcast.
From Berlin to your block since 2018.
Full episodes are available only to subscribers, and there's hundreds more in our archive.
Join now on newmodels.substack.com or patreon.com/newmodels.
And you know the New Models Discord is popping. Patreon only. Stop sleeping and subscribe now.
New Models, you won't get it anywhere else. You're now locked in with New Models.
New Models Talkcore.
Talkcore.
It's talk, but it's also core. Blah, blah, blah.
It seems everyone is talking about Talkcore.
Would you like more Talkcore?
It's Talkcore from New Models.
Happy New Year from New Models. I'm Lil Internet. For our last episode of 2025, we bring you a conversation recorded with Jay Springett, a writer, lecturer, Royal Society of Arts Fellow, and strategist who blogs and podcasts from his site, thejmo.net. He's also been an active contributor to the solarpunk movement since its earliest years. When we last spoke in 2024, we discussed the past, present, and future of worlds, the term Jay uses to describe the many hybrid tech media environments in which so much human communication now takes place, and the many downstream effects of a world's design. A year ago, Jay started writing a talk on how things have changed since 2008, the year of the great financial crisis, but also a tipping point in our digital infrastructure, with Apple introducing its App Store and Facebook switching from a chronological to an early algorithmic newsfeed. This talk expanded into book form and is now nearly completed. It's titled Slop Machines of Loving Grace and considers the implications of what might happen when AI agents become users of the world of human culture. The conversation that follows takes this piece as a jumping-off point for an appropriately wide-ranging conversation about the changing nature of art, narrative, and communication during, as Jay reminds us, this still early period of the information age. I'm Lil Internet with my co-host Carly Busta. Our guest is Jay Springett. Let's get into it.
So Jay Springett, welcome to New Models IRL.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, in recent months, we've been lucky to host a string of guests: Kevin Munger, Mark Pollux, and Roberto Alonso Trio, Orit Halpern, Dean Kissick, Gideon Jacobs, Olivia Kahn-Sperling, Danielle Felsted, and Jen Lung, that taken together represent something of a constellation of new thought around media, or really a new ontological framework for our time. There are, of course, many others that we'd add to this group: Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, Joshua Citarella, Federico Campagna, maybe, Nicholas Biltine-Czar, Chris Bloom, Shuman Basar, but also you. And so it's no surprise to us that your work has come up repeatedly in almost every one of these conversations that we've had. The key refrain has been this idea that identity in a time of online profiles is less about proving an authentic self than convincingly puppeting a persona, like animating a profile with a life force. But you, over the last year, ended up writing a book that has the provisional title, Slop Machines of Loving Grace.
Slop.
Do you want the plosive?
Yes.
Slop Machines of Loving Grace, echoing, I imagine, the title of the Adam Curtis film, All Watched
Which is
Over.
also based on a...
Poem.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
which
Ginsberg?
poem?
Well, in cybernetic meadows, we will lay down whatever the lines are. I can't remember who it's by now, off the top of my head.
I mean, there's so many places where we could begin. A couple of months ago, you mentioned to me that you were writing this book, and then you asked if I was curious to see it, and I said, of course. And then you sent me like basically 100 pages that listed like every single thing. It was as though somebody had done like a data dump from my brain. But maybe as a way to get into this, we can start where the book starts, which is roughly in 2008. And you cite that year, of course, because of the financial crisis, as enabling a phase shift that extended to civil society and beyond. So take us to that moment in your head.
Yeah, 2008 feels like a significant moment in the millennial generation it's almost the same as like, where were you or what you were doing, the same way as boomers think about JFK or something like that, you know?
Right.
And friends who are slightly younger than me who graduated after 2008 still have like lower earnings than people who entered the job market before, for example, just in terms of their careers and so on and so forth. So it's like a permanent shift to like our experience of the economy. But also 2008 is like the year that we see the first algorithmic feeds on Facebook. And a year before, NVIDIA releases CUDA, the CUDA framework, which gives us like AI that we're living with now, was announced in 2007 and the first cards went on sale in 2008.
CUDA is the almost like BIOS level software that allows GPUs to do what exactly? Like
the large mathematical operations that allows AI to be possible.
Right.
Yeah. So originally it was for like graphics and calculating.
Right,
you know.
that's...
Yeah.
So CUDA opened it up to other applications, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like the LLM future that we live in now is downstream of that CUDA moment from NVIDIA in 2008. And at the same time as that was going on, post-2008, we then start to really see the acceleration of exocapital and just the complicated arrangements that we see today. Like if we thought that credit default swaps were complicated in 2008. And to that point, actually, a lot of people who are currently like aghast at the way that OpenAI or Anthropic, you know, when they see those diagrams about who's invested in who and who's swapping who, the same thing is happening wherever you look in the modern economy. And I think it's actually like the horror that people perceive when they see these diagrams about AI. It's like absolutely everything works this way now. And all of that begins to take shape like after the 2008 crisis, the reconstitution of the financial system. And so since then, so I guess like the last, 17 years? The future that we live in now, or the present that we live in now, was built over that period, like post-2008.
17 years, God. Has it been that long?
17 years?
17, it has been. Jesus Christ.
2008.
I mean, I remember sitting at my desk at Art Forum on 7th Avenue on YouTube, watching people leaving Lehman Brothers just uptown, emptying out the office and feeling like it was strange that I could like watch this simultaneously as, you know, pedestrians were uploading this video. But that feels like it's within our same time period as the present. But it was 17 years ago?
Yeah.
God.
We have listeners who watched that video when they were 8, Carly.
That's true. I think we have listeners who maybe were barely born then.
Yeah. I mean, the really famous photos of Northern Rock Bank in the UK with the bank run happened in Kingston upon Thames when I was working there at the time, and walked past about a couple of hours after those photos were taken and police were still outside the bank. And it was a real moment, you know? And when we look back on 2008 now, especially in the UK at least, you know, people talk about the hubris of Gordon Brown saying, oh, we saved the global economy or whatever. But the reports say that we generally were hours away from running out of money in the cash points. And it was really serious. And has basically like affected our lives ever since. And from that period onwards, we get this new era.
I mean, in your book, you speak about this jolt that you felt that afternoon having that experience where you did see where capital touches the ground and the dire crisis it would cause in the real lives of many, many people.
I also think about how before the financial crisis, like the world's richest people had like $10 billion or $20 billion. And now it's 10x that.
Right.
Which in like tens of billions, like that's an unfathomable.
As we always say, it's on a scale that you can't feel with your human body.
Right.
Like that's not a scale that you can understand physically.
We're talking about people 10xing their wealth since then in tens of billions. Like something's wrong, like really wrong with that.
I mean, one of the interesting points you make in your book is that from that moment forward, increasingly, all of us started living in the America that is Instagram, the America that was Twitter, America that is Google, America that is Substack, the America that is Discord. And I understand this to be one of the motivations for writing this. But what does happen to that America as the state apparatus of the United States of America implodes, and what happens to the inhabitants of that America as the state apparatus that organizes America breaks down?
I mean, it's a very good question. Ultimately, the argument is that we kind of end up in these code spaces that are American in origin, and therefore we become subjects to this American way of thinking and being, and the way that our identities are formatted for us within the logics of Americana rather than whatever our local cultures are. And it really is, I mean, it's like, everyone's watching Netflix and so on and so forth. It's not, it's the content as well as the spaces in which we're hanging out. Right?
That's true.
And I mean, as for what's going to happen, I think there's that meme that's going around about how the Roman Empire became a church, the British Empire became a bank, and America becomes a protocol. Right? I think that's probably like the end game.
Right.
As like the domestic situation begins to go south.
In the book, you introduced this term code spaces. And when we last spoke with you, we talked about your use of the term worlds as a way of expressing the fundamental differences and environmental totality of the digital platforms and protocols we spend our lives engaging with. In a way, your concept of worlds was trying to express something on the same scale or order as our use of the term physics when talking about online platforms. And so if we think of worlds and online physics, where does the term code spaces sit in relation?
In Slop machines, I'm using code space rather than worlds in order to not muddy the waters so much. The code space itself is like the raw physics. And I'm using code space in the book because I want the people who are reading this not to be thinking about worlds, Dungeons and Dragons, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So code spaces would be like any digital space where you're kind of subject to the physics of it and it's constructed
to the math
out of
it. I mean,
deterministic or algorithmic code.
So in the book I talk about how Deliveroo riders are subject to code space even though they're in the physical world. Like, their bosses are algorithms and they're being directed via Google Maps. They're literally in the metaverse as they're like cycling around delivering food, So I think that's a simpler concept to, excuse the AI pun, but to grok, than talking about them as worlds, which I think is a little bit more art coded, I suppose.
Right, and socially coded.
Yeah, so in the book, I spend quite some time talking about the formation of data subjects and identity within code spaces, like the raw physics of how that comes about, I
always am curious about when law and maybe by extension financial markets started to operate really strictly as a code space. I mean, do you consider financial markets at this point a code space? Is this something that intensified after the financial crisis? Has it always been a code space? I mean, are you also considering code spaces as being outside of explicitly digital platforms?
Yes. I am also currently writing another essay, which will probably be the first episode of Permanently Moved now that I'm moving to a new, longer format.
That's your podcast that you've had long running. Yeah.
It's called Monsters in the Mirror. And in that, I'm talking about technologies that reveal humanity as a kind of sensing device. And the example that I give is like double entry bookkeeping and how that is a code space. So finance, the first kind of abstracted code space in finance probably arises not necessarily from the tally, El Nazir complaining about his copper or whatever, but the double entry bookkeeping or the ledger. And then it's just a case of complexification and speed. And in the book, I introduce a new term, which is not necessarily new because it was super popular in the early cyberpunk writings about the internet, cyber theory and all of that stuff, but basically calling the internet the semiosphere rather than cyberspace, in that it's a place of signs and symbols. We can talk about having identities there. We can talk about symbolic logic and physics of the semiosphere, and obviously capital and modern finance exists entirely in that same realm.
I mean, to just bring in some of the discussion around exocapitalism, since we just had this launch here in Berlin. This is Mark Pollock's and Roberto Alonso Trio's recent book. I think their theory of capital dovetails well with this understanding. I mean, double entry bookkeeping, does that start with the Medicis, I think?
Is that right?
Even before then?
Yeah.
Okay, so in their book, they proposed an entirely different theory of capital than the one that most of us, have come to know, that says, what if capitalism is a set of mechanisms that pre-exists humanity and that may persist after we're gone and doesn't necessarily need us to run. And in this case, we can think of double entry bookkeeping as a key moment when humans tap into this mathematical, linguistic force. I mean, I'm sorry to be so abstract. What if this is this almost, I don't even want to call it a biological system.
Ontological.
Or no, beyond even that. Yeah, but what if it's on the level of the way the stars and the planets align? Some kind of
Cosmosemiotic.
Cosmosemiotic, right. And there are these moments where when we develop an abacus, or there are moments where humans find ways of tapping into the system, of harnessing it. I mean, as Marek and Roberto point out, as early as the Han Dynasty, you have people struggling to rein in arbitrage practices of traders, right? Mm-hmm. Capitalism is something that humans can intensify in ways that are more or less deleterious to human thriving, but what if it's pre-existing? Yep. So in terms of your question, Julian, about markets being in code space, capital lends itself well to code space, and there are various kinds of code spaces that have been innovated and evolved across human history, right?
Yeah.
I mean, does that sound like it?
Yeah, I kind of think that James C. Scott's legibility and, statistics literally means science of the state in German, right?
Right, true, right.
And double entry bookkeeping, kind of those two things combined are essentially like a sensing device, or it's a mirror in which capital can see itself. And we're now, 500 years down the line of capital staring at itself in the mirror, and it wishes to see more and more by abstracting everything into something that it can see, make it legible sort of thing.
And they can parse.
Yes.
That it can output in various forms.
And I'm extremely glad that the book Ordinal Society exists. Their concept of the data subject, that we are subject to this system of interconnected databases and, ordinals that are continually ranked and re-ranked against one another.
So maybe we could unpack what a data subject is. In particular, I think about this in relation to this idea of the creative individual, the sovereign individual. The idea of a data subject obliterates that. Suddenly the self is sharded into a bazillion pieces.
Yep.
Can you speak a bit about what you mean by data subject, and also what that means for the human individual? How does a human individual relate to the self once they become the data subject?
Yeah, you have this identity format that you have inside of a code space, in that however many thousands of data points that Facebook has on you, for example, like Star Wars is a vegan, all of these points that make up you as a data subject, in order to be more legible to the logics of the code space, you kind of have to lean into the way that the code space thinks about itself. The example that I give in the book is just the way that people signal their fandoms in their bios, or political identity or gender identity, and so on and so forth. You do this because
if you've made it this far, you already know New Models is for you. Subscribe now at newmodels.substack.com or patreon.com/newmodels for all of our full episodes and the hundreds more in our archive.